My name is Daniel Fox, and welcome to the Future of Space, where we talk, ponder, and wonder at everything involved with our expansion beyond Earth and into outer space. Today on the show is decorated NASA astronaut, fighter pilot, humanitarian, social entrepreneur, author of the critically acclaimed books The Orbital Perspective and Floating in Darkness, Ron Garan. Ron, welcome to the Future of Space.
Thanks, Daniel. It's great to be here.
How are you at the beginning of 2022?
2022, awesome. 2022, I believe, is going to be the year where we all get to harvest the seeds we planted over these last two pandemic years. So I hope that 2022 will be the year where we, first of all, come out of this pandemic and things, we start to see the dawn. It's been a dark night, a dark 2-year night, and hopefully we'll see the spring here in 2022.
And how excited are you about where space is and what we're about to see this year and the years ahead with all these expeditions that are lining up and these new companies and these amazing partnerships between governmental entities and corporations, the private? This is such an exciting time.
It is a very exciting time, and to the casual observer, it looks like it just sprung up, right? But this has been decades in the making. Especially these public-private partnerships. I was on the first source selection board that issued SpaceX their first NASA contract to supply the space station, and that was back in 2006. So these things have been percolating for a while, but we are at the dawn of a new era of space exploration, a new era of commercial space travel. And I think it's really exciting. It's very reminiscent of the early days of aviation. Back in the beginning, it was a very rare occurrence that somebody flew in an airplane and had the opportunity to see the Earth from the vantage point of an airplane. And now we don't think twice about flying on a jet anywhere in the world. And I think we're going to start to see that developing, that industry, that commercial space travel industry, in earnest now.
How important do you think competition is for this momentum moving forward? Obviously, China has been quite active in developing their own space station. There's a lot of countries, and also the competition between private individuals who've been, kind of putting a lot of energy into making 2021, I think it was the tipping year in our relationship with space, and now getting this enthusiasm working out for so many of us.
I think competition is important, but competition, healthy competition, is important and productive. Unhealthy or disruptive competition is just that, disruptive. And I don't mean disruptive in a good way. So, if the competition is fear-based, that usually leads to some big problems. It leads to corruption. It leads to it's not collaboration, or it's not competition that leads to better goods and services. It's competition that leads to increased prices, reduction in services, I think competition is important, but I think more powerful than competition is collaboration.
Absolutely.
And especially when you're talking about things that require innovation, and so. When you have collaboration that's built on a foundation of awe and wonder, not a foundation of fear, then instead of having these little pockets of innovation where people are inventing things in a vacuum, the innovation feeds off itself, and there's a free share of ideas and creativity. And I think that's a good way to do things.
Ron, how excited are you? Still excited every time that you see a rocket go up and coming back?
Yeah, of course I am, especially if I know people on the rocket. It's very exciting, and I don't think that'll ever go away. I think I'll always get that same sense of thrill and excitement watching rockets go up. Of course, I always wish that I'm on the pointy end of it, but.
Yeah. Do you plan on actually going back up if the opportunity presents itself?
If the opportunity presented itself, and there was a good reason to go, I would go. I think for me, where I'm at in my life, having spent 6 months in space and flown twice, and I wouldn't do it just for the thrill of it, although the thrill of it is definitely worth it. But at this point in my life, it would make sense to take somebody else's seat, or if there was a valid reason to go, if there was a risk benefit trade-off that was analysis that was conducted and it came out on the positive side of the equation, then I would certainly do it. Having said that, it's pretty easy. It's pretty easy to make the argument that there's a good reason to go. So,
talking about the amount of time that you spent in space, one of the questions that I want to ask you is, from that experience, can you give us 3 words to describe space?
Well, the 3 words that pop into my head are cold, dark, and empty. But I think that's just on first glance, first appearance. I think a better 3 words would be foundational potential of everything. If you don't count the of, that's 3 words. Because it is. I mean, space is what allows everything else to exist. If we didn't have space, we wouldn't have anything else. So it's a dichotomy.
I think it connects to that contrast that obviously William Shatner expressed in such a emotional way of darkness and life, and darkness and life.
I think he's called it
death.
Yeah.
Yes. But I think going into space is going to remind us of how these resources that we take for granted, life that we take for granted, is really hard. And the humility that we will have to learn by going out and being reminded that everything that we take for granted now has to be put into a lot of effort, whether it's food, whether it's sewers, whether it's oxygen, will actually trickle down to the planet and make us kind of change our perspective and our relationship with the planet itself.
Yeah, definitely. I think that becomes undeniably clear when you see the planet from the vantage point of space. What becomes clear is that each and every one of us is riding through the universe together on this spaceship that we call Earth, and we have a closed life support system. We're not getting resupply from somewhere else, and we need to do something to reduce the rate that we're using up non-renewable resources. We need to do something to reduce the rate that we're affecting the makeup of our atmosphere because of the protective nature of that unbelievably thin layer that protects and keeps every living thing on the planet alive. And so, when you look up at the sky from the ground, it looks like the big blue sky, but seeing it from space is scary. I mean, I trained for 8 years. I was selected into the astronaut program in the year 2000. I didn't fly until 2008. And so I listened to 8 years of crews coming back saying how unbelievably thin the atmosphere was. So I had, pretty high expectations for the thinness of the atmosphere. But there was nothing that prepared me for seeing that. And it's really, really scary. And there's no doubt in your mind that we as a species could affect the composition of the atmosphere to a great extent.
So on that note, I mean, you've kind of answered a little bit, but what do you think going to space will teach us? What will be the major lessons because there's a lot of people that say, oh, no, we don't need to go to space. We have enough issues and it's not going to do anything. But every time that these frontiers have been opened, there's always an expansion of consciousness. There's big lessons, whether once you go up into that mountain and you look back, we talk a lot about the overview effect, but going to space, as more and more people will go, what will be some of the major lessons?
Well, I think the big one, first off, will be we will learn how to live together on this planet. I think the International Space Station is a perfect example of that. Just one perfect example that the space program gives us. 15 nations of the International Space Station Partnership built the International Space Station in space. Some of these nations weren't always the best of friends. Some were on opposite sides of the Cold War, opposite sides of the space race. Some fought wars against each other and purposely targeted each other's civilians in an effort to break each other's will. So you started at that as the starting point with that, and somehow these nations found a way to set aside their differences and do this amazing thing in space. And for me personally, I spent the first 15 years of my adult life training to fight the Russians, America and the West's most menacing enemy at the time. And then fast forward, a decade or two, and I find myself at the base of a rocket that's going to take me and my 2 Russian military officer crewmates to space on a cold April evening from a previously top secret Soviet military installation. And I look up at the rocket and there's an American flag and a Russian flag side by side. And so, when we're on the International Space Station, there's not the Russian crew and the American crew and the Canadian crew and the Japanese crew and, whoever. There's just the crew. There's one single unified international crew that works together to maintain and protect the life support systems of the space station and continue the mission of the space station. And one of the examples that we need to follow is, we need to act as if, because we are, one single unified international crew on the surface of spaceship Earth that works together seamlessly to protect and maintain the life support systems of spaceship Earth and further the mission of the Earth, which hopefully is to bring us to a harmonious, restorative, positive future, a future that we'd all want to be a part of. And so I think one of the best things that the space program gives us is this example, this shining example of international cooperation and how we could work together. The other side of the coin, why this is all possible, and what the individual partners of the International Space Station program did, is they set aside fear and embraced awe and wonder. And so there's 2 really, really powerful motivators of action. There's fear on one hand and there's awe and wonder on the other. But only awe and wonder motivates long-term action. Only awe and wonder inspires rational thought, inspires cooperation and collaboration. And when we build our future on a foundation of awe and wonder, anything is possible. But that's not what we're doing right now. Right now, we live in a very fear-based society, which has led to a lot of divisiveness and polarization. Yeah. So the more awe and wonder we can introduce into our society, into our civilization, the more awe and wonder based motivations we can introduce, the better off we're all going to be here on the surface of the planet.
Fear and guilt, and those are the 2 predominant pillars of the current narrative. And I personally don't have any children, but I've worked with children, and I know that if you keep telling children that they're bad, they will believe that they're bad, and then they will have the low self-esteem. And I think that collectively we have to not dismiss the problems that we have and the mistakes that we've done, but we also have to change the dialogue around it and remind ourselves that life is a little bit more complicated, and the success of the human species is to go beyond the mistakes and learn from what we do and to keep pushing the boundaries. And because we're ambassadors for life, this is what we do as a species.
Exactly.
You wrote when you came back, you wrote the book, the critically acclaimed, The Orbital Perspective. And then you followed with The Floating into Darkness. Can you tell us the difference of what the first book is really about, what the second, and the journey in between of those two books?
So The Orbital Perspective is a book that takes the overview effect one step further. And so I actually wrote the foreword for the 4th edition of Frank White's book, The Overview Effect. And I was in the movie and our partners now, creative partners with the filmmakers who made the film Overview, and which explores the shift in perspective that astronauts describe after seeing the planet from and in space. And so it's the light bulb that comes on that that shifts you from an intellectual understanding that we're all in this together, because I think everybody understands that. It shifts from that intellectual understanding to an experiential understanding, right? You experience it, you see it with your own eyes, you feel it, you see how interconnected and interdependent we all are. You see that the truth that we are one people with a common origin, riding on a on a shared spacecraft called Earth towards a shared future, for better or for worse. We're all crewmates on Spaceship Earth. And so if that's the overview effect, the orbital perspective is what you do with that shift. The orbital perspective is the call to action that comes from the overview effect. And that's what I explained in the foreword of the fourth edition to the book. And so my purpose in writing the orbital perspective was to use this perspective, which is a powerful perspective. It's a powerfully unifying and an inspirational perspective to inspire a greater level of international cooperation to solve our greatest problems, whether that's climate change or global warming, or at the time we didn't have a pandemic, but we do now, and so and it won't be the last pandemic we have either. And so, how do we work together as a planetary community to solve these planetary problems? So in a nutshell, that's the orbital perspective, and it has a lot of history of how the partnership came together, and it was my first book, and I'm happy with the way it came out. I'm proud of the way it came out. I basically accomplished what I set out to do with that book. But in Floating in Darkness, I take it to a whole nother level. And Floating in Darkness, the objective of Floating in Darkness is to illuminate a path out of the divisiveness, out of the polarization that we are presently faced with, and to illuminate a course a course correction, if you will, that we can make towards the restorative, positive future that we'd all want to be a part of. It's a different book in style. Floating in Darkness is an autobiographical narrative that serves as an allegory for the evolution of society, not only where we've been, but where we need to go. And it's written in first-person present tense, so it reads like a novel. So the reader comes along on the journey step by step as it's happening. And like I said, there's some really, really important messages in the book. And I didn't hold anything back. I was admittedly a little bit in relative terms, orbital perspective relative to Floating in Darkness. I used a lot more courage, I think, in Floating in Darkness. I really opened myself up and really tried to share, not just, like in the space stories, for instance. I went really, really deep into the emotional and spiritual and intellectual aspects of what I was experiencing as I was experiencing it, and all of it serves as part of this thread of the message, the overall message of the book.
You and I, we've spoken before about the book, some of the reflections about the difference of the two books. Orbital Perspective was kind of looking back at your experience, and Floating in Darkness was looking forward, and the cover of the book expresses that.
Yeah.
The cover of the book, you told me, was designed really mindfully and with intent. Every aspect of it is there for purpose. The astronaut floating, the tether, and the hole in front. Can you explain more about what you try to convey with
here it is. There it is. So if I could, so my idea behind the cover was that this is a journey of evolution, right? So I'm trying to show the evolution of society through the book, and so I wanted to combine two images. I wanted to combine the idea of a cave, because it's also I use the allegory, Plato's allegory of the cave throughout the book. And for anybody who's not familiar with that, basically what Greek philosopher Plato postulated back in his day was that there was these men who were chained in a cave their entire life. They had never left the cave. and they were facing a back wall. They couldn't turn around, and shadows that were cast on the cave wall were all they could see, and the sounds that emanated behind them echoed off the wall, leading them to believe that the shadows were making the sounds. And so they spent their whole life classifying and learning about the shadows on the cave wall. And then one prisoner escaped and saw that there was a greater world out there that was better in every way, and he felt sympathy for those still trapped in the cave, and he went back in and tried to free them, but they would hear nothing of it because they thought he was crazy. This is the real world and inside the cave. And so throughout the entire book, I use that allegory to describe a greater idea of reality and an expanded reality. And I talk about how we tend to unlearn what we were born with, a lot of the understandings that we were born with as children, and we unlearn that so that we can function in society. We put ourselves in a limited subset of reality in order to function effectively within the societal requirements. And so there was always this idea of a cave. And so I wanted to merge the idea of floating in space with being in a cave. And so, and there's also a lot of references to birth in the book. And so the umbilical cord of the astronaut is, obviously symbolic of the umbilical cord in the womb. So I wanted the whole thing to evoke the womb as well, right? Because we're giving birth to awareness, we're giving birth to a new human epoch, we're giving birth to, the future, basically. And so, one of the ideas I had was I was going to have on the cave wall, it would start out with, cave paintings, prehistoric cave paintings, and it would eventually go to blueprints and, technology and all this stuff. And I basically painted a painting that evoked what I wanted to do. And then one day I was at work and I saw a screensaver on somebody's computer that had basically, almost identical this picture, which is identically what I was trying to convey, and in a much, much more provocative way than I was able to do. And so I contacted the artist and basically licensed the image and modified it slightly for use as a cover of a book. And so the image is called The Verge. And it was made by a guy named Milton Menendez in Brazil, and so that's where that image came from.
So you talk about birth and being part of the process of that new transformation. Now, you and I, we've never given birth, and we'll never will, but I hear that it is a painful process. How important do you think getting outside of that comfort zone, feeling that pain, is important for that new birth that we're going to experience?
I think it's critically important. I think that all growth comes from some discomfort and pain. It comes from getting outside our comfort zones, whether that's voluntarily or involuntarily. And, growth occurs in darkness. Seeds grow in the darkness of the earth to become fruit-bearing, bountiful trees. A fetus grows in the darkness of a womb to become a sentient being capable of pondering infinity and the meaning of life. Our mind is rejuvenated in the darkness of sleep. And I think it's during those times of darkness, those times of pain, those times of discomfort, that real growth occurs. That's the cycle of life. That's how it works. And so we can transmute our pain and suffering into wisdom and growth if we so choose. That's an opportunity that we have. And I think we as a species are going through tremendous suffering all around the world. And we have been since the dawn of time. And today is no exception. We have almost 6 million people who have died from COVID-19 over the last couple of years. And so we're paying a tremendous price right now. We're paying this price whether or not we get a benefit from it. So we might as well get a benefit for the price that we've already paid. We have the opportunity to come out the other side of the pandemic more resilient, stronger, more equipped to deal with other crises that might come down, more unified into a planetary civilization that realizes that things like pandemics don't respect national borders. They don't mean anything to those things, and natural disasters fall in the same thing, and pollution falls into the same thing, and global warming falls into the same category. And so we have an opportunity. We need to evolve or perish, and by evolving, that means coming together. That means unifying. That means understanding that all of these artificial things that we've developed that we think are providing security to us are actually leading to our demise.
Now, on another topic, Steve Jobs in his famous keynote talked about staying hungry and foolish, and curiosity being really one of the pillars of moving forward. You've met Richard Branson, you've met Elon, and did you meet Jeff? Jeff also?
No.
No. But you met a lot of people that went up to space.
Mm-hmm.
Is curiosity kind of the thread that unites, that connects all these people who are pushing the boundaries? Is curiosity really like an important tool to nurture in the kids in our society?
Well, I think there's probably a whole smorgasbord of motivations, but curiosity is certainly one of them. And I think it's a very powerful, because curiosity to some extent is rooted in awe and wonder. It's curiosity, if you really boil it down, is a desire to experience awe and wonder through the discovery of something new, or to the learning of something that was previously unknown. And so I think that, that's a very powerful driving force. It's a very powerful positive driving force, a force driving towards a positive future. So I think that's definitely part of the equation.
Now, I'm extremely grateful of your time today, but I know that your agenda is busy with the keynotes and with your books, and yet you found the time to write a book for children. I assume that the children are not paying you your keynote fees and the corporation fees, and it's more of a love project. Why did you feel that it was important for you to write a book for children, which is named, The Train?
Sure.
There you go. Railroad to the Moon.
Yeah, Railroad to the Moon.
Why did you spend the time and the energy and investment for the book?
For two reasons. And I started writing this book in 2014, I think, and so it was, and it just got published a couple months ago, so it's a long time coming. But the two reasons are, first of all, I wanted to paint a picture of the future, a visionary picture of the future that we can aspire to. And that's having a permanent human presence on the moon, or the Earth's closest neighbor, that has thousands of people, including children, living on the moon. And I also wanted to inspire children, especially young girls, to dream big and to realize that they can accomplish anything they set their mind on. And so the story is about a little girl who goes to the moon. I won't tell you how she gets there, but somehow she goes. A little girl in the present time goes to the moon, and eventually, I know I'm giving away kind of the ending of the story, but not really. Eventually, she becomes the mayor of Armstrong City on the moon.
Nice.
And so, those are the two motivations. And I wanted to do this because I really think that the most important thing for our future, the most powerful thing that any of us can do as individuals to make a course correction to steer towards a positive future, is to assist in the development of the next generations, to help inspire and motivate and steer and nurture the next generations towards a awe and wonder based future, not a fear based future, because they get bombarded day after day, minute by minute, by negative messaging, fear based messaging. And they're, a lot of children are very impressionable, and there's tremendous damage that can be done to them, and that not only hurts their own individual lives, but it hurts society because that effect ripples out in all directions. And so I wanted to put something into the world for young kids that has a positive, awe-inspired, inspirational message. And we're also going to start a YouTube channel directly geared towards kids. I already have a YouTube channel, but I'm going to make another YouTube channel geared towards children for that reason, to help inspire and motivate, and let them know that anything's possible when they do things together, when they work together with others.
It really saddens me when I see kids today, young kids, because I work with them, but with the level of anxiety that normally you expect in adulthood, or like when major events have happened in life. And we know how stress and anxiety can stop growth and really change the development. And to see these young adults, or all this potential that is threatened because of that narrative that is based on fear and guilt, it's heart crushing.
Yeah, that's a huge problem right now. I mean, kids are supposed to have fun. I mean, that's part of the development process, is to have fun, is to explore, is to play. And, when they're all locked in their houses because of one thing or another, it's an issue, or they're exposed to so much of this negativity and fear-based divisiveness and polarization, that doesn't stop at a certain age. That filters down throughout the entire population, through all demographics, and it affects in a very negative way. And so that's why we should all commit ourselves to being a positive force, a unifying force, and not a divisive force in our society.
Absolutely. Now, when Edmund Hillary, when he went up on the Everest, he came back and devoted a lot of his life to the Sherpas and created a foundation, and most of his work after that was to protect and to support that. You went into space and you came back, and on your website you call it Planetary Stewardship, and that became also a really important part of your life. Mm-hmm. You started a company, now the company has evolved and is moving to new direction. But how important is that planetary stewardship?
It's the ultimate of importance, because we only have one planet. And, this idea that we're going to go to Mars or go somewhere else in the solar system and, leave a sinking ship is ludicrous. I'm a strong proponent that we need to establish a permanent human presence on Mars, after first establishing a permanent human presence on the Moon, and then basically reaching out and extending human presence throughout the solar system and beyond. I'm a strong proponent of that. But we need to do that as ambassadors of a thriving planet. We can't do that as, people in lifeboats escaping a sinking ship. Just technically, it doesn't make any sense. If we can't control the temperature of our own planet by a couple of degrees, we're not going to be able to terraform planets. We're not going to be able to develop the life support systems necessary to maintain large populations on any heavenly body. And so, I think planetary stewardship is really important. Carl Sagan said, like it or not, I think like it or not, for the time being, the Earth is where we make our stand. Yeah. The Earth is where we make our stand. And anything, wherever we're at when we launch to space to go, settle on another planet, whatever we have here is what we're taking with us, whether it's our governance, our environmental practices, it's our mindsets, it's our consciousness. That's what we're bringing to space. So any problems that we have on the Earth, we'll just bring them with us wherever we go. So that's why it's so important that we fix the problems we have here, and then when we go out into the solar system and the galaxy and the universe, like I said, we're going out as ambassadors of a thriving planet. And so planetary stewardship is a very, very critical thing. Right now we're completely upside down. We treat everything, including the very life support systems of our planet, as the wholly owned subsidiary of the global economy, which is absolutely ridiculous because it's exactly the opposite. The opposite is the economy is dependent on society, and society is dependent and embedded in the biosphere that we call Earth. So what that means is that the global economy is the wholly owned subsidiary of the biosphere, not the other way around. But our political, our business, our cultural systems all put the complete focus on growing the economy at all costs, and treat everything, including the very life support systems of our planet, as the wholly owned subsidiary of the global economy. And this is absolutely upside down, and is what's leading us to disaster, and is what we need to fix.
Now, despite all that, do you believe that? Are you an optimism, or a realist, or optimism? Do you believe that yes, we will figure it out?
I am an optimist in a long-term view. I'm a pessimist in a short-term view, because we have not demonstrated that we are willing to take the steps necessary to build the future that we'd all want to be a part of. We're too focused on the short term. We're too focused on the next shareholder report, the next election cycle. We're not thinking multi-generational, and that's gonna lead in the short run to bigger problems, to more challenges that we have to overcome. But I am absolutely convinced that in the long term, we're gonna figure it all out. Figuring it out, that's not the right thing, because what I mean to say is, in the long term, it's going to work out, whether or not we figure it out.
Yes.
So there's a bigger equation here than just us.
Absolutely. Now, if we had the capacity to go 500 years in the future, or even 200 years, and asked them to imagine the future, what we are today would not even be comprehensible for them. They could not even imagine that this is possible, because was it Ford? If you ask people what they want of a car, then just more horses. What do you think are let your imagination go wild. What is the future of our species in the place that we can't? It's hard for us to even create, to draw it, or to imagine it.
Well, I think the crux of your question is technological, but I think, and correct me if it was more broad than that, but I think you can't separate the evolutionary aspects of us as a species from the technological advancements that we're going to, just even from a technological point of view, we're going to have technologically induced evolutionary changes into our DNA. We already are having that, and that's going to expand. But I think from an evolutionary point of view, the first big giant leap for humans on the evolutionary scale is when we achieve the ability to self-reflect. When we achieve the ability to say, I'm a person, I can project my past to my future, I could plan for the future, I could do all those things that we take for granted right now in a modern civilized world. The next giant leap of evolution, which we're in the middle of right now, we're in the middle of this inflection point, is when we as a species, not as just little pockets, but we as a species realize that the self that we're self-reflecting on is not just an individual, but it's part of a bigger cosmic journey. That beyond the physicality of DNA, we are connected on a scale that's incomprehensible. Even from a scale of DNA, if you go back far enough, every single person on the planet can be traced back to the same mother and father. So we are literally all one human family. But beyond that material view of it, we're connected much more. And so all of the problems that are facing our planet, all the solutions that are being developed to solve the problems facing our planet are going to be nothing more than Band-Aids, temporary Band-Aids that we slap on things until we get to the point when we realize there's no such thing as them. There's only us. And so if a natural disaster happens somewhere in the world, it's not, oh, those poor people over there, let me write a check or let me do something. That's happening to us. That's happening to us together. And so, again, just like going to space, you shift from the intellectual understanding, because most people understand that intellectually. That's not a giant leap from the intellect's point of view. It's a huge leap for the ego. And what I mean by that is it's a huge leap to understand that experientially, to experience that, to feel that unity in a real way. And going to space started me on a journey to a deeper understanding of the beauty of our interconnected, interdependent fabric of life. But you don't have to go to space to realize any of that. And it just started me on a journey. It wasn't the epiphany. It was the beginning of the epiphany. So, but I think that's so to answer your question, where we will be in 500 years is where people would think that this is a ridiculous conversation that we're having. Of course, there's no them. There's only us. Remember back in those days, centuries ago, when people actually thought they were independent and they weren't, interconnected and interdependent like we all understand now.
Absolutely.
So, and again, I think it's really important that we can understand that intellectually, but to incorporate it into our very soul is a whole nother story.
When you talk about experiencing space and the way that we learn as human species, it always reminds me of Jacques Cousteau that's exactly the same thing that he said about experiencing the ocean by going underwater. So you see that we're all connected. Mm-hmm. We're going to conclude this. I want to be mindful of your time, Ron. Any words of wisdom as we move forward? I know that we're in this transition. This is going to be hard. We've talked about a lot of things. Your book, do you want to share where you're going, what's next, where people can find you as we wrap up this interview?
Sure, yeah. I mean, websites are always good. I got a website at rongaran.com. Each of the books has a website under the title, so floatingindarkness.com, railroadtothemoon.com. But the advice I would leave is to stay strong, to stay positive, to not succumb to the divisiveness that's swirling around us, not succumb to the negativity that's swirling around us, and to see the light at the end of the tunnel, to see that by coming together, that is the path out of this. The path out of this is to come together, to work together, to set aside our differences, to realize that there's no them, there's only us, and that's what's going to bring us out of this darkness.
Ron, I look forward for our path to cross in 2022. If it's not 2022, 2023, but for sure, you and I will look back at these last 2 years over a bottle of wine, and we'll talk about the big lessons and where we're going into space. Thank you so much for being on the Future Space.
Thank you, Daniel. I appreciate you having me.